Hey everyone, NBC News political correspondent Ali Vitali here. Welcome to NBCU Academy. Today we're talking about how to cover a political rally. I've been on the campaign trail and covering campaigns since 2015 when I was the NBC News embed assigned to cover the candidate Donald Trump. Since then, I've covered the White House and the midterm elections before heading right back out on the presidential campaign trail for my second presidential election in 2020. I followed Democrats like Elizabeth Warren, Amy Klobuchar. We're on the bus.
Here we are on our big green bus.
Then Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in the general election. For Joe Biden, it's a reintroduction for him, not as President Obama's number 2, but as his own entity at the top of the ticket. In other words, I've been to a lot of campaign rallies in tiny towns and massive metropolises with surging candidates who earn big crowds and those who don't. The first step, though, is deciding which rallies to cover. If you're assigned to follow one candidate, it's kind of a no-brainer. You go where the candidate goes. But on days when multiple candidates are in one place, you can also attend several events in one day. That lets you compare and contrast firsthand the ways the candidates are talking to voters and the way voters are receiving them. Sometimes you prioritize seeing a candidate if they're surging in the polls. Other times, if they are in the news or haven't responded to an important news event, you seek out those events and ask them about it.
Is there any part of you that sort of relishes that you'll have the campaign trail a little more to yourself once the impeachment inquiry goes to the Senate?
I don't know that I'm going to have anything to myself.
Once you decide where you're going, though, make sure you have the essentials. I never leave home without my cell phones. Yes, plural. Charging cords, my press ID, my makeup bag, some hairspray, a baseball cap, and, sign of the times, extra masks, sanitizing wipes, and hand sanitizer. Next thing, do the travel math. Know how long it'll take you to get there and plan for any delays, like time spent finding parking or accidentally taking a wrong turn. At presidential events or rallies for a candidate with Secret Service detail, you'll have to go through a security check to get in, which can mean lines and delays. And especially if you're up against the clock for a live shot, make sure that you arrive early. That said, things happen, which is why it helps to have friends. Get to know campaign staffers and White House advance officials and communicate with them if you know you're running late or you're up against the clock. Now, before you actually start covering the rally, do a little research. How did this county vote in the last election? Who are its congressional and local representatives? And are there any major local issues that the candidate might have to touch on? Maybe has another high-profile politician rallied here before? So now you're inside the event. Space is sometimes scarce at some of these rallies, either because the venue is small or because there are a lot of other journalists also covering the event. So that means you should be prepared to work from your phone. Recording apps like voice memos or Otter are really helpful tools in your toolbox because they allow you to go back and re-listen to something the candidate said, or they give you a backup if you weren't able to take word-for-word notes in real time. Keep this in mind. Political events are two-way conversations. So while the candidates make the news, they're really there to talk directly to voters, and you should be too. I almost always talk to people before events. Sometimes I do it with a camera present. Sometimes, though, I do it without. Some of the most authentic conversations can come when you're off camera. That's okay. You can still talk about the content of those conversations later when you're on the air or in your story. As I've been talking to voters at these events, Chris, I've been seeing a lot of them use the words candidate shopping. So Amy Klobuchar definitely getting a fair shake here on the ground, elevating her position. Now it's just up to voters to decide. Man or woman on the street interviews, otherwise known as voter interviews, really help bring viewers and readers into the room. I always look for nuggets that I can share that I can only get by being on the ground. So to that end, you'll want to ask voters why they took time out of their day to be here, if they support the candidate, and if there's anything that might happen or that the candidate could say that would make them change their mind. But also try to ask voters how old they are, where they're from, or what they do for a living. All of that can be used as color later in your scripts and stories to really introduce audiences to these voters as full characters.
I think it's most important that we hear from voters, so I want to bring in one of them. His name is Blake. He's from Iowa here, and you just listened to Mayor Pete Buttigieg speak. If he were elected, he would be the first openly gay president of the United States. What does that mean to you?
Now, once the event starts, listen up and take notes. Sometimes it's easy to identify the headline, like if a candidate weighs in on news they haven't spoken about before, or if a certain line gets bigger applause than usual.
So we gotta win. We gotta win.
That's a huge part of this. And also, can we just address it right here? Women win.
But other times, the changes can be smaller and only noticed by beat reporters who hear these remarks regularly. Which is why, if this candidate is new to you, it helps to review their usual stump speech. This way, if they deviate from it or add something new, you'll know right away.
She's really leaning in on gender. Right now, she's not bogged down in any arguments with any of the other candidates that are in this race. She's really able to just message her closing pitch without interference from the other candidates. And the closing pitch is simple: women win, period.
Also be aware, things can happen in the crowd that could become the unanticipated story, like protesters.
There are a lot of people still left inside here, a lot of protesters, some of them chanting for Bernie Sanders, others of them chanting anti-Trump things. Some of them even said to me in passing, we did it, as though they got Trump to cancel his rally.
You'll want to be able to move to get a good look or even shoot footage. Remember, mobility is good. At some events, this will be harder though because press are asked to stay in one area. But at other events, you can walk through the crowd during the event and, if it's safe, get up close to whatever is happening. Once the event is over, if it's a larger event, be sure to ask a credible source for the crowd count. Campaigns may inflate these numbers, so while their estimates are helpful, it's better to find a fire chief or ask the venue for their own count. And finally, prepare for the possibility of a gaggle. That's Q&A with the candidate and a group of reporters who follow them. This is your chance to ask questions, get them to clarify something new they said in their remarks, or get them to weigh in on new headlines. Your reaction to getting the Des Moines Register editorial board endorsement just now?
I just heard and I'm delighted. It really means a lot to me.
Then, you're off to the next town, next state, next rally. Remember, covering political rallies can take a lot of preparation. Don't forget any of your gear, talk to voters, become familiar with the stump speech, and pay attention to audience reactions or any other newsy changes. For NBCU Academy, I'm Ali Vitali. Thanks for joining me, and happy trails. Literally.